And Julia will be with us shortly.
Hi, I'm here. Don't call me short.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Running in from the door.
Yeah.
Hi, we're on Facebook Live. I've got Maria Wells, who is broker of Lifestyle Realty here in Martin County, and Robin Hicks Nunley, who is executive director of the American Red Cross in Martin County and Palm Beach County. And also, I didn't want to skip over, Maria has, we're going to have a discussion about floods and flood insurance and all that. Maria is very important in that discussion because she is the chairman of the insurance committee for the National Association of Realtors, and she's our incoming president of the Florida Realtors for 2017. Thank you, Maria, for taking time, as well, Robin. You're busy ladies. And I told my viewers earlier tonight that we're going to have an earful about flood insurance. And the whole point of the show is to talk about things that make a difference and talk to the people who make a difference in Martin County. Mm-hmm. And because it all started with Dancing with the Martin Stars, which, don't forget, I'm in that in 10 days. Wow. Got my dress delivered today.
Yeah.
Yes.
What color is it?
It's a real pretty color.
Okay, you're not even gonna say. All right,
yeah.
good.
It's in the sky color.
Okay.
No broken toes.
I have one. Yes.
Really?
I dropped a very heavy object on my foot today.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. On my left toe, my big toe, but we'll talk about that maybe later. But yeah, I came limping in. You saw me hobbling in.
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, I was. So it's going to heal.
So graceful.
Yeah. Twinkle toes.
Yeah.
And now I'm twinkle big fat toe on my left foot.
Aww.
But anyway, I want to get right into the discussion. Maria is, you've been involved with insurance for the NAR, and you're going to be able to fill us in on what's going on with the insurance in the insurance world. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in that.
Hi, Julian. It's great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got involved, I've been chair at Florida Realtors for the insurance in the state of Florida. I was very much involved when we had citizens and had to work on depopulating citizens after the hurricanes, and we had so many policies in Florida. And it's always been a passion of mine. And then this is the second year that the National Association of Realtors has had an insurance committee. Yet last year was the inaugural year. At that point I was vice chair, and this year I'm chair, and so something so important, we never had a formal committee. But Florida's really leading the way, and our current national president, Tom Salamone out of Fort Lauderdale, knows how important this is to Florida and had appointed me into that position. And the great thing is, with working at it, it allows us, realtors are the voice of our consumers.
Yes.
And, we make sure that we look at what the community needs, and then we take that voice in a very powerful way as realtors to, whether it's Tallahassee or Washington, and with next year being the renewal of the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program, it is really important that we're going to have a voice, because none of us know how that's going to look next year.
Wow, yeah, and it does change. People think things just stay the same, but we know the only thing that stays the same is change. We have laws that change. Nature changes things. I talked to you about this earlier, that Hurricane Ike, which hit the coast of Texas, was really the beginning of the change in the insurance industry, because that storm went all the way up into Ohio. And it changed all the actuaries. And also then last year we had Sandy, Superstorm Sandy. They didn't want to call it a hurricane, but it was a massive wind and flood destruction animal. And now we've got, guess what, Hurricane Julia dancing off the eastern shore of Florida. How appropriate. Oops, back to me.
It's just about you.
It's just all about me and Dancing with the Martin Stars. But also, I want to say we've had a disaster in Louisiana, and Robin, you know all about the disasters and how American Red Cross swoops in. It's amazing what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the American Red Cross and what you're doing now, some of that going on? And we're going to tie in all of this together, I promise everybody.
Yeah, and you mentioned Superstorm Sandy, so let's talk about that, because what's happened in Louisiana, it is a larger response than Superstorm Sandy, a $30 million relief effort for the folks in Louisiana. And the unfortunate thing with flooding is, typically when we have a storm, a hurricane, We'll stand up a shelter, folks will evacuate, the storm blows through, and a couple of days later, people back in their homes, they're repairing and picking up limbs and you know, putting things back in order. When there's flooding, sometimes it takes 2-3 weeks for the water to recede.
Right.
So in Louisiana, we've done almost 70,000 nights of sheltering for those folks. At the height of the storm, we had, I think, more than 10,000 people in a shelter. There were areas in Louisiana that flooded that had never flooded before. And as if that wasn't enough, that was on the heels of the spring storms in Mississippi and Texas, and then some flooding in South Carolina and West Virginia. So you mentioned change.
Yeah.
Climate change is
Right.
one of the things that we're dealing with, and how that impacts our weather is debatable. We're not really sure,
Right.
but we are seeing a lot more storms, a lot more flooding in areas that we never knew possible.
Wow, go ahead.
So let me touch on where Robin went, because thank you for making the audience really understand how incredibly impactful this is. And in Louisiana, the very sad part, and you said that it's in areas that never really flooded before. They were in areas for the 1,000-year flood, 100-year flood. It's called, and many of them are what's called an X zone. And for those of you out there that don't know the X zone, it's one of the more mild flood zones, and it's the only one that is not required with your mortgage to have to insure. So here's what happened. It was an election of homeowners if they decide to have X insurance or not. And over 80% of those consumers did not, they were either uninsured or underinsured. And when I talk about underinsured, they may have insured their home for flood, but they didn't insure the contents. And as you know, everything is wiped out in a flood. There's nothing salvageable, especially if it's days and days on end. And yet, a flood policy for an X zone is about $50 a month. It's minimal. You will never, ever pay enough into that to recover what your contents would be. So I can't encourage people enough to have X zones, to get insurance if you're in X zone. You know, I think it's, in Florida especially, let me just say, is that, you know, almost all of Florida is a flood zone. But the scary fact is of how few policies we really have. Like, we could take Martin County, for instance, and we have almost, you know, single family residence is about 50,000, and there's 17,000 policies. Now, you know that that's like, what, 30%? So we are at risk of 70% of the other homes if we were to have something that had that event because they're not insured. And truly flood insurance, so that the listeners really understand, if you're in an A zone or AB or any of the major flood zones, and if you have a mortgage, your mortgage company requires you to carry flood insurance. You have no choice but to have flood insurance, and currently that's with NFIP, the National Flood Program. We can talk about private insurance in just a little bit, but so they're required. But if you have your home paid for, you don't have to have it. That's a risk you take. And if you don't, and if you're in an X, nobody makes you take anything, but it could end up just like the disaster you're talking about in Louisiana, which is just devastating. And, you know, let me just give you some numbers, because at 80% that you see that you're doing all of those homes for housing, the unfortunate part is people think that the government's going to bail them out. But the realistic thing on this is this, that right now those homes are seeing, out of all of those thousands and thousands of homes, some of them are getting, or most of them, somewhere an average of $5,000. There's a few that are getting like maybe $23,000. You can't replace a home and furnishings for that. So, you know, it is a false sense of security that homeowners are out there thinking the government will take care of it. No, you're going to be paying a mortgage and taxes and everything while trying to recover a home because failing to get flood insurance.
And even the areas that don't flood, mold is a continuing issue. So,
absolutely,
you know, anything that absorbs any kind of moisture, you know, you're going to have a lingering problem with mold. That's what some of the houses now are experiencing. So they're gonna be rebuilding there for quite some time.
And Robin, maybe you can tell too, because, you know, I can talk on all the facts with flood insurance, but, you know, give our viewers an idea of what a home looks like when it's been flooded.
Oh, gosh, you know, if they're lucky, they would have gotten in ahead of time and cut out the drywall so that the water doesn't seep all the way up to the drywall, because if that happens, the home's condemned and there's really not much you can do with the electrical systems and that kind of thing. So if they're lucky, they'll cut the drywall. But if not, frequently you'll see mold all the way up the sides of the houses, on the ceiling. Everything in the house has to be sanitized. Most everything is destroyed. It is devastating. You know, more than 4,000 Red Cross volunteers converged between Baton Rouge and some of the areas in Louisiana to help open shelters and feed people, served almost 1 million meals there. The vast majority of those 4,000 people were volunteers. We sent, I think, almost 50 people. I think we were up to 48 the last I heard, from South Florida alone. So, you know, those folks, they need help there. And that's what it's like when you are in a disaster. The folks who are there are experiencing the disaster, so they're not really in the position to help themselves or the others around them. So we bring in people from all over the country, and more than 4,000 people went to Louisiana to help. Some still there. We're still doing virtual casework with folks to try to continue to connect them with additional resources that could be helpful, but it's a challenge.
I know my vice chair for insurance that serves with me nationally lives in Baton Rouge. And he's obviously a realtor, and many of his realtors, you know, their homes were devastated along with the community, and has a long-standing history of living in that community. And he and I have had numerous phone calls of the reality of what this is, and at no time ever did they think this was an area that was going to flood, because many of them were sort of high. It wasn't that we're all talking lowland. People think of New Orleans. This is not New Orleans. This is Baton Rouge, where it could easily happen in Martin County without protecting ourselves. And he tells me story after story of families that literally have no clothes, no anything, because everything was ruined.
One of the more interesting stories that I heard from someone was the perspective that their house had flooded all the way up to the front door, and they had sandbags around the front door, and just something as simple as a car going down the street would be the difference of whether or not your house flooded, because it would create a wake that would send the water into the house. That would then wet the carpets, and and again, once the water gets in the drywall, it goes all the way up. So it doesn't have to be much water either. So it's fascinating to think that, you know, you'd be safe, but a truck going down the center of the street would be the difference.
And you know, with flood, in Florida, we don't just have water, we have wind. And that's a huge issue. And are they talking about that on your insurance committee, Maria?
Well, really, policy owners need to carry a few different kinds of insurance. You need to have,
talk about that.
You may end up having 3 types of insurance. You're going to have your homeowner's insurance, you may have wind insurance.
Yes,
and then,
homeowners, that's general liability, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then wind for hurricane is a separate part on your policy, and then also flood. And so it's those three different kinds of insurances that work together with protecting a homeowner. Now, you know, when it comes down to the time that you have a need for this, you know, the unfortunate part, you're dealing with 3 different adjusters, all of the things, but you know what? You're dealing with someone who's going to help you versus the people that have nothing. And, you know, fortunately, Florida has become pretty strong with their homeowners and property insurance, with all that has been done over the years when we moved more away from citizens and brought in private companies. And just like with what happened with that, we really are working very hard to bring private flood insurance, primary flood insurance into Florida. There are some. In fact, a lot of these homeowners that have X zones are great candidates to be able to be in the primary market of flood insurance. We are way ahead of the game in Florida. We are, I believe, the only state that has legislation in place to move into a private market. We are waiting. There's 2 things that must occur for us to be able to move it in totally, and that is to be able to have grandfathering, so if you leave the NFIP, you can get back in there with those grandfathered
Kinda like
rates.
homesteading, being able to
Right.
transfer and have portability.
Right, and so to protect the consumer, you know, if that company goes out of business or whatever the case may be, that they can get back in at the same grandfathered rates that they have.
Yeah, that's good, cause the rates have gone way up.
Mhm. And also lender approval, and
Ah,
those two things, there's a bill going through, it's HR 2901, or known as the Ross Murphy bill. It passed unanimously a couple months ago in the House. It's stuck in the Senate, not happy it's stuck in the Senate, they're only there for a couple more weeks, we don't know if it's gonna make it through, we've really been pushing the Realtors are a very powerful lobbying, whether it's Tallahassee or DC, you know, probably one of the strongest out there. We've been really lobbying hard to get that passed. We don't know if that's going to happen. There's some issues that Senate is looking at, and of course, we're in a political year.
Mhm.
So, you know, sometimes, and I'm just gonna say it, sometimes it's not the benefit to the consumer, but it's all about politics. And yet, we need to get this, and the good news for Florida is we really are leading the country, no matter what we do. You know, when we're up in DC or we're talking to our fellow realtors around the country, Florida is about 10 years ahead of most of the states. We are being extremely proactive with what we need to do, but we still have a long way to go. We haven't even touched yet on mitigation or different things, so.
And how does somebody find out what flood zone they're in and what that affects them, how that affects them, if they need flood insurance?
Well, here's something that probably consumers don't know, but what they really need to do, because the easiest way, it is very difficult to get through to those maps, the easiest way is to call their local realtor. And realtors have access instantly to tell them what flood zone they're in. You can't, there's ways to go about it, but that's one of the tasks we've asked FEMA is to make this easier, but so pick up the phone, call your realtor, use them as a resource and go, what flood zone am I in? Or they can call their insurance company.
Right, their insurance company, right, and they'll be able to find that out easily. I just want to remind everybody, you can interact with us. I want to say hi to Troy McDonald, but stop talking smack about me, Troy. He says he's going to win. What? And hi, Mary Ellen. Thanks for joining us. Mary Ellen Castellano and Tibor, hi out there. And Jeremy Bingham. He's you've moved to Massachusetts? What? Wow.
I didn't know that.
I don't know. I don't know. Talk to me, Jeremy. So, but I want to ask Robin, how do you coordinate all of these people going to all of these places? What's that like?
Yeah, we have a workforce engagement team all over the country, and it's the logistics of disaster relief is unbelievably impressive. A lot of different organizations come together. Different organizations provide different aspects of it. The Red Cross is probably the most comprehensive and can literally stand up a city in a war zone, basically. It's a pretty fascinating process, pretty self-sufficient, self-contained, and operates shelters, does feeding and canteening. Again, with some of the partner agencies do some of the cooking, and it's a massive effort. The other thing that you don't realize sometimes is that a lot of the supplies from the local area, you can't necessarily procure them. So even something like feeding people, because remember, when you're in a shelter, they get 3 meals a day. So for some of those folks who have been in a shelter since the rain started, that's been several weeks, 3 meals a day, almost 1 million meals we've delivered there. So, having all those supplies brought in logistically and planning ahead for how many meals you need to prepare, and it's quite a coordinated effort.
Wow, that's impressive. And to that end, you're in charge of 2 counties, Palm Beach and Martin County. I pulled up some information. The website to go to, which is great, is redcross.org. And you can do /South Florida, because Robin is in the South Florida region.
That's right.
And the South Florida region covers Broward County, Greater Miami and the Keys, Palm Beach and Martin County, Florida's coast to the heartland, Florida's southern Gulf. So
Right,
we're pretty-
13 counties in the South Florida region.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's 5 chapters within that South Florida region. And, so I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the apps for smartphones. We have a number of different apps, I think 12 apps now. You can go to either whatever your phone's app store for both Android and iPhone platforms. And there's one for hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. There's first aid, there's CPR, there's pet CPR,
Oh,
pet
wow.
first aid.
Oh, great.
And so we really try to get folks to use the apps. You can put in multiple locations. So for example, my parents live in Central Florida, my daughter's in South Florida, we're here in Stuart. So I've hit multiple locations, and I'll get a weather alert whenever there is bad weather in, say, Central Florida where my parents live. So I call, hey, you folks okay? And so it's really, really helpful to manage different locations for friends and family throughout the country. And then there's also a way that you can plug in to let folks know you're safe. Frequently communications are down in a storm,
Yes.
and so that's really the most challenging thing, is reaching people when there is a disaster. And so you can plug in a way to let folks know that you're safe after a storm. So it's a very powerful tool.
That is, technology is amazing. Like this, is amazing to do Facebook Live. I love it. And I've discovered this and stumbled into it. So it is really cool. What does somebody search in their app store? Do they search American Red Cross?
Yeah, just do Red Cross.
Okay. Okay.
And all the apps will come up.
Wow.
There's even an app for kids. It's a game called Monster Guard that was developed with Pixar. And so kids can go on and learn about disaster preparedness. That's one of the things that we're most concerned about. You mentioned wind. We haven't had a storm here. I was about to say in 11 years, but of course last week Hermione broke that. But the truth of the matter is South Florida really hasn't. We've been very, very lucky.
Yeah, we've escaped.
And so there's some concern that there's a lot of complacency and apathy among residents here. And so educating children and families on disaster preparedness is part of what we do. That's so important.
Well, that's good. And you provide emotional support, not just food and clothing, but emotional support. And that's so valuable because this is a traumatic time in people's lives.
So some of the folks who were deployed to Louisiana are spiritual advisors, and they work in the shelters. They work directly with the families. We have counselors who serve on our disaster action team, and those are the folks who respond to fires. A lot of people don't realize the American Red Cross does respond to more than 70,000 disasters throughout the country every year. But the vast majority of those are individual home fires. So when you are displaced from your home because of a home fire, I mentioned several partner organizations respond to the larger disasters, but the Red Cross is the only organization that responds to home fires. So while the firefighters are fighting the fire, the Red Cross is there standing shoulder to shoulder to make sure that people have a place to stay, they have food, they have clothing. If there were medications in the home that were destroyed that someone needs for life-saving, we have doctors on call. We can call in a 24-hour prescription and get that taken care of. And then, of course, we have spiritual counselors on call if there was a loss of life or even the loss of a pet. Sometimes that's a very traumatic experience. So that's a very important part of care and comfort that we deliver.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to welcome Ken Willett and Jane Harness, who have just joined our Facebook Live broadcast. And we'll be taking a break on the radio, but we don't need to take a break here on Facebook. We can keep talking. So we'll have you guys come back on WSTU.com. When you come back, we're with Robin Hicks Nunley of the American Red Cross and Maria Wells from Lifestyle Realty, and a big honcho in the real estate world, my president next year for Florida Realtors, and she's the chair of the insurance committee on the National Association of Realtors. And thank you, Maria, for all you do, and Robin. And we'll be talking to you guys when you come back on the radio, and we're going to keep talking on Facebook Live. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the radio when we come back from break there. All right.
You get that information from Martin County?
What?
The data on if you're in Florida, Martin County.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
but
it's
true.
not as easy to find.
Right.
The easiest thing is through our MLS.
Our MLS, right.
Well, you just go
And
to
this
tax
is,
return.
and this is a good point you made, why you want to use a realtor. People who sell their houses by themselves don't get the opportunity to have all this information at their fingertips. We are walking, talking encyclopedias for everything that they need to know. And
also know Martin County's got a higher number, it's a 7, on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yes. FEMA, they're, you know, the
Dade-
ratings
Dade
down.
County.
You can't hear you guys. Can you turn that down in here? Okay, thanks.
Dade County is a 6, St. Lucie County is a 6, and.
You're talking CRS.
And that's
Yes,
the
the
rating, so
rating
that's what you
system.
pay, and we're a 7, so we pay more money because, our county has done a good job of policing the,
And that's part of
waterfront.
mitigation, that's something we are really trying to, we've worked hard up in Florida Realtors, our Tallahassee office and a group of members, try to help communities to do it. Some communities are very aggressive. You have, I think it's Osceola, I believe there are 3, I have to look, but they did an incredible job with their CRS.
And
You
tell
know,
us what CRS stands for.
Community rating system.
System, right.
And
And
what
so-
that does is a community has to meet so many criterias to, so if there is a flood, that they can get lower insurance. So as they work on this, and for a lot of communities, it's having a full-time person, staff person within the community to do it, or within the county to do it. But to lower that, you know, 10 is like the worst, so you wanna
Yes.
keep going down, you wanna get as low as
The
you
lowest
can.
it can be.
And each one represents a percentage that everyone in that county can get off of their flood insurance. And I can tell you right now, you know, the realtors on a state level and national level are really looking at this. We've gotta bring the ones in the community, you know, to be able to really push it, because it seems that, you know, it's the realtors who are the ones looking
Now
out for
back
the
to the
consumer.
Martin County
Okay.
difference here on
Sorry.
WSTU Digital 1450. Back to your
Your phone's going low.
That was quick.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back on the radio, WSTUTV.com, and on the webcam. Hi, up there. But we're also staying live on Facebook during the breaks. Figured out from last week that if we just sit here and look like this, that's silly. So we can actually keep still having a good discussion, which we were doing, and talking about the community rating system that Richard was bringing up about Martin County has a higher rating, which is not as good as having a lower rating. So we have to work toward getting that rating down, because then our rates go down with that rating.
Well, I think for our listeners to really understand,
Mhm.
you'll hear either CRS or community rating system, and what that is how a community is really rated for preparedness for a flood. And that can be, there's many, many tasks that a community has to do
Right.
that. You know, 10 is the worst, Martin County's at a 7, there's only a few in the country that are as low as a 3. The goal is to get it lower, because then you can get up to, you know, 25% discount for your insurances, you know, across the board. But it's really having to push the community, and it takes pressure to be able to do it, because that is really an important thing, and that has everything to do with elevation, or how new homes are built.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things that happens a lot of times is that, you know, a new home might be built, and during that time, a new flood map may come in, and that flood map says that they now are in a more severe flood zone. But because that it was granted to be able to build, it had the certificate to build at that previous flood zone, it's built at that, and guess what, that's gonna cost that homeowner thousands of dollars a year if it happens to be in one of the flood zone areas. So there's things that communities need to do to protect, you know, and it might cost more, you know, to be able to build a home that's just a few inches. Sometimes it's a few inches to get you into that next elevation, but a few inches of dirt and whatever that costs will, no matter what you pay, it will far be better than having the expensive flood insurance and the mitigation that you're gonna have to do later that you might not be able to do. I think one of the things that, you know, we're talking about everything that happens after a disaster, but what we really need to look at is, what do we do to prepare to not have this happen?
Yes.
And you know, and thank goodness, Robin, there's people like you and Red Cross and
Yeah.
everyone, and the volunteers, you know, there's just, you know, it's one thing about Americans, they pull and help,
Yeah.
which, you know, makes me so proud of our country. But let's talk about what we need to do before. And most people don't want to do what it's going to take before, because it's expensive to mitigate for flood. And, you know, it may be very painful and painful for communities, and there are some states around the country that have done just exemplary work on mitigation. I mean, you can move everything from lighthouses to whatever, it's very expensive. And one of the things that I can tell you that the Realtors are a champion up in Washington is mitigation. And of course Congress goes, well, how are we gonna pay for this? Because of course nobody wants to pay for anything. So what we're looking at is some really great ideas, and that is that bringing the states back to, you know, making sure the money is there, that we do mapping, flood maps at the state level, and do them much more accurately than what's being done. We have wasted millions of dollars in the country on flood maps. The maps are horrible.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that right now. Who decided and when and what is the deal? You know, it's like, it's
With the
just
flood
like,
maps?
what? Yeah, like they just changed them.
Well,
Why?
it's really interesting. I testified in Congress in January. It was on flood mapping.
Okay.
And flood mapping is a huge issue, to take paper flood maps and make them digital. Okay, so all that did was we all do it. You scan a piece of paper and it's now digital. Well, that didn't do anything. Somebody agreed to do that, spend that kind of money to take a piece of paper, scan it and put it in. They never looked at accuracy. You know, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to do an elevation survey. There's LiDAR radar where planes can fly over and do it. What we need to do, and what we're really looking at, and there's going to be a cost savings not only around the country but to the states, because there is money to do it, to bring it back into the states so that we could have our own flood mapping. North Carolina has done an amazing job with their flood mapping, and here's the benefit. They have done every single parcel in their state. They also can tell who has dropped their flood insurance and who hasn't. And you know, you go, okay, government's watching that. No, communities need to look at what's going to be their collateral damage. Should we have an event like what you're dealing with in Louisiana and around the country? We need to be proactive, going, okay, we have these many consumers that have elected to not have flood insurance, and what are we going to do to cover it? Because you know what, somebody's going to pay for it, and that's the taxpayer. So the mapping, they changed those. Because just like Robin said, you know what, global warming or whatever you want to call it, you know, water levels are rising, you know, down on Miami Beach. They're seeing that the ocean's getting closer and closer in.
Right.
It is happening. Nothing stays the same. Earth moves. It's just how it's going to happen. So the flood maps move, which actually brings the point of, you know, right now, Florida has less people paying for flood insurance than they did 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we were a state that represented 40% of the flood insurance policies. Right now, we represent somewhere about 34%. And so you go, why did that happen? Well, a lot of it is the new flood mapping, and it gave consumers a very unrealistic idea that all of a sudden, across the street is a flood zone, but I'm no longer in a flood zone. Water doesn't know to only go to that line.
Yeah.
It doesn't go, well, we were told on the flood map that we are not going past this. You know, water is going to go where water is. So, you know, when many were lifted from that bad flood zone,
Right.
and people dropped their flood insurance where they should have just been running to get, you know, flood.
A cheaper policy.
Cheaper policy,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
for being in an X zone going, oh my God, hallelujah, I can pay less money, I'm covered. My neighbor has to pay more, but I've got the X and we're all covered. But instead what they do, well, I don't have to have that. And yet, we know, Julia, when people are looking for homes, what do they want? Granite.
Closer.
They want granite countertops
Right.
and stainless steel appliances. And for $50 a month, they can pay for flood insurance and not deal with what Robin was telling us, that these families that are so hurt by a flood. So we really have a misunderstanding, and I think there's a couple things. And, you know, hopefully we'd all agree, I don't think anyone really knows the right questions to ask. We know when people go to a closing table, what do they want? They're going, okay, what kind of insurance do I have to have? So, okay, I've got a wind and hurricane, I'm gonna have that. Then they ask, do I have to have flood insurance? Well, let's see, you're in an X zone, well, it's not required, well, then I'm not having it. But instead of both the realtor and the insurance company talking and going, let's look at what this is really gonna be like for you if you elect not to have it.
Yeah.
That's knowing some information to give the consumer that the consumer doesn't know to ask. All they're thinking is, okay, I don't want another $50 payment a month.
Right.
I don't wanna do it, and
We shoot ourselves in the foot a little
Yeah,
bit. We
and-
go cheap on things, and you get what you pay for.
and
Isn't
If
flood
you're careful.
insurance rising water? Any kind of rising water?
it's rising, yeah, it's rising.
So
water.
what if your pool overflows?
Well, no, to get NFIP, to get your flood insurance, they have like rules on what it has to be. It has to cover so much land, so I know it has to be like a continuous 2 acres or whatever. There's some sort of rule,
Okay,
so it's
so
a good point.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, I had a flood in one of my properties a couple years ago. I had a tenant who, basically changed a water filter and the water kept running, and 500 gallons of water later,
Oh.
the home did just what you said. The drywall had to be cut and a $50,000 repair. That was not covered by flood, which I had flood. It's not flood, it's your homeowners, because
That's good.
that's an event that happens within your home. So, but flood is, we have these rains, and we've had flash rains and flooding, and it's your car, it's your home, it's everything, like you said.
Okay. We have about 8 million people in this area that you serve, isn't that right?
Well, Palm Beach and Martin's about 1.8 million, but yeah.
In the
each-
South Florida region.
Yeah, about 8 million.
In
Yeah,
the
that's good.
13 counties.
Mhm, mhm.
That's extraordinary. Most of that population is down south though, right? So where Maria's talking about in Miami, they're really seeing this, the land is sinking, the water is rising kind of phenomenon. And, we just need to, like you said, be proactive, I think.
Mhm.
What are some things we can do from the American Red Cross standpoint?
Yeah, so, we, in terms of preparedness, we like to tell people to make a kit, get a plan.
What's in the
and
kit?
stay informed. And so your kit would be things like a flashlight, a radio, things that you need in a quick evacuation, things that you're gonna need in a storm, change of clothes maybe, deck of cards, medications, any kinds of things that you're gonna need if you need to evacuate. So,
Yeah.
so get a kit. In fact, we have a project for children that we do in grade schools called the Pillowcase Project.
Oh.
And it's a pillowcase designed by Disney, kids color it, and they learn about all the things that go in their pillowcase. And there's been a number of testimonials, especially lately with some of the disasters that have happened, about how the children were more prepared and were able to help direct the parents in terms of what they needed for an
Fantastic.
evacuation. So the Pillowcase Project is a really successful project that we do throughout the school system. And so get a kit, get a plan. Know if you have to evacuate, and sometimes it's quickly, like you said, flash flooding, it can be in a matter of minutes. So if you need to evacuate, find out where you need to go. If there's a shelter close by, what is your shelter? If you can't go to a shelter, where are you going to go? And then stay informed. And of course, we recommend downloading the apps, but there's a number of different apps that you can use. Most of the television stations have apps now. The Emergency Management Office has apps. So there's lots of information out there about staying informed and what you need to
Tune
do.
in to WSTU.
Tune
There
into
you go.
WSTU.
Thank you, Frank, yes. WSTU,
Do we have any
1450.
callers, or do-
We haven't had any callers, but I've had some interaction on Facebook Live, and it's been, thanks Troy, you shared the video, and Carrie, Caroline, and Sue Gajewski is watching. You know Sue, she's the president of the Jupiter to Quest to Hope Sound chapter of Realtors. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us. One thing I wanted to say is I really wanted to thank Maria, because she's my salsa sponsor for the Dancing with the Martin Stars. So she's wearing 2 hats. She knows all about flood insurance, and she's a realtor, and she's a top-notch broker here in Stuart. And you have an office in Pennsylvania, right?
I do.
That's incredible.
And they have big flood issues.
Oh, they do?
Yes, they do.
Oh my goodness. But I can't thank you enough for being a sponsor for me. And so this is my plea. This is the time in the show that I say, please don't forget to vote for me. It is 10 days away. I am doing the Latin Hustle. This is for Healthy Start Coalition. They ensure that all babies born in Martin County are born with a Healthy Start, hence the name Healthy Start Coalition. And they really do a great thing. They'll help a young mom if she's got depression, if she needs diapers. I mean, it's from one end of the spectrum to the other. If the child is at risk, the baby, they make sure it gets the medical attention it needs. All kinds of things that can happen, and do happen with having a baby. And it's not based on economy or economics. You can be rich, you could be poor, doesn't matter. As long as you've got a little bun in the oven, you qualify. And I've had a few women come up to me, now they know that I'm doing this, and they're like, I could not have gotten along without Healthy Start. I'm like, really? Great, okay, that's good. Come on my show and talk about it. But this is why this show started, was to bring awareness. It's a great organization. They're all over Florida. They're in every county. This is a pretty big deal, this event. It's sold out a month ago. And so you're lucky you got tickets because you sponsored.
I know, I'm so excited.
I know.
I'm really excited. I could never do what you're doing. I could not get out there and dance in front of everybody with what you're doing. I'd have more than one broken toe.
Yeah,
I'd
well,
have like a
I
bunch of
haven't
broken
done it
toes.
yet, but I'm definitely on my way. So that's, and I was gonna rehearse tonight, but my little toe, my big toe hurts so badly that I decided to take a rest. And it was out of good works. Tana Honey, I wanna thank Tana. This morning I put out on Facebook that my niece Mary Woodard Smith is coming to visit for this show. She's coming all the way from Houston, Texas, and my sister Catherine and Sam Massey, her husband, they're coming. All big entourage coming, and Mary has a 6-month-old little baby girl. And we have no baby things in our house, you know, so I put out the request for, you know, anything like car seat, crib, pack and play, you know, a swing, anything like that. So immediately, Tana Honey, man, like within a minute, thank you, Tana. And then she brought it to my office at Coldwell Banker this morning, and I was there, and I was like, oh, it's a perfect time to take a picture. This is great. I'll get it on Facebook. And I had no idea that the pack and play was open on each end. I just thought it was open on one end. So I picked it up, and it in a vertical motion, and it went whoop, down on my big left toe.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's like 50
That's
pounds.
what hit your toe.
That's what hit my toe. That's the large object flying through the air, and I did it myself. And it
You
was
needed
like,
a better story than that. You needed to be like you were doing some
Yeah.
incredible thing. Not
Right, yeah.
opening a pack and play.
well, yeah, but that's where my photo op got me in trouble. So,
Get a
Climbing-
better story, Julia.
sorry, climbing the Grand Tetons, and I slipped on a boulder. You know, so. But I want to thank you both for coming in. It's been very extraordinary to hear all of this, and I hope our listeners appreciate the knowledge that comes with these two beautiful ladies. And the work you do is extraordinary. And this is all about doing good work for the community. You do make a difference in the community, and I want to thank you for that. And not only just Martin County, across the board. You're in Palm Beach County, but it's the kind of thing that, like Maria said, we pull together as Americans. So it's really wonderful. We have these great volunteer organizations. And tell us a little bit about how people can volunteer.
Yeah, they go to redcross.org and fill out an application, or just call the office and we'll direct you through. But, you know, the Red Cross prides itself on volunteers. More than 96% of our
Wow.
workforce is volunteers. So we really leverage the power of volunteers through the work that we do. So be grateful to have anyone help us.
Yes, yes, yes. And kids can get involved too.
Absolutely. In fact, Martin County has one of the best youth groups throughout the country, recognized as a best practice throughout the country, Martin County's youth group. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
That is great.
What about scouting? Do Scouts get involved in Red Cross in any way?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you say that. We haven't collaborated yet, but I just had a meeting and talking about doing some overlay of our programs. Yeah.
Ah, good.
Yeah,
I kind of hope
yeah.
maybe that was in the offing. Great.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a good pool of talent to take advantage of.
They have some terrific leadership programs that we
Mhm.
can utilize. Yeah.
And we have a few other people who joined us. I want to thank Mary Gonzalez Murphy. She thanks you, Maria, for the work that you're doing to protect our area in Tallahassee. And she says, I'm doing a good job too, so thanks, Mary.
Yeah,
And
Of
Sue
course.
Gieske says, informative, thank you all. And Carrie Caroline says, thank you, Maria, for the info and flood insurance. Great advice, we'll pass along. And great job as always, Julia. Well, thanks. And Mike Schofield, thank you for all the great information. Mike's on, so thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining us. And Troy, don't be talking no smack now. I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat you down in that competition we're having, Dancing with Martin Stars. It's in 10 days, you guys, and I still need you to donate. The donations are part of my dance score, so I gotta do this thing, the hustle, the Latin hustle.
And hustle for money.
And hustle for money at the same time, which is always so much fun. I want to thank all the people who have supported me so far. You've been doing a great, great service to my ego as well, because I am second in fundraising right now. And cumulatively, all 9 couples, the star dancers are the people like myself who are in the community, not real dancers. And we've raised over $120,000. That's the most money that this organization has received from any event like this in this county.
Fabulous.
And you know what, Julia, I do really want to thank you about that, and here's what, and I have to just say a plug for Realtors, because Realtors are intertwined in their community. I will bet you have
Yes.
a lot of Realtor volunteers
Yes.
in the Red Cross.
Mm-hmm.
Realtors are intertwined into every fabric of
Absolutely.
their community. You know, what you're doing is beyond what I could do, but you know what, because Realtors, we are the face of our consumers. We are the consumer.
We live in the community.
We live in it, and so, you know, I want to thank you for all you're doing, and I also, you know, want to just say to anyone, if they even have a takeaway, to please, I beg you, to look to see about your flood insurance policies.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a night talking about flood insurance and flood disasters, and we want to make sure that we drive that point home. Check your policy, make sure you've got enough coverage, make sure you are covered for flood, especially here in Florida. And this is an important topic and a hot topic across the nation, not just in Florida. And I just want to say, rally around the Realtor. That was a little plug. Thank you, made me think of that, because that's my plug right now, is rally around the Realtor. We have 10 days left, and Realtors get it done. We make it happen. And this was something else I wanted to tell everybody out there. I'm having a fun little contest within the contest. I have 2 bonefish cards bonefish grill worth $100 each. And I'm gonna have a drawing. If you send in $25 minimum for 1 entry, you can send as many entries as you like. Per $25, you can enter for twice for $50. $100, if you enter 4 times, gets you 4 entries. That's $100, gets you recognition in the program that night, which is great, written into the Friends of the Dancing with the Martin Stars page. And you might get your $100 back in a bonefish grill card. So that drawing will be on September 23rd. That's a great way to be involved, and I believe in giving back in more ways than one. So I've got these bonefish grill cards, and that's going on. And if you don't have $25, you know what? I'll be dancing for just dollars. At this point, no pole involved. But send your dollars, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever you can spare. It is to help little babies. And who doesn't love little
That's
babies,
right.
right?
So I have a question. So
Yes.
can they vote too? With you know, does a voting count, or is it all about the dollars?
The vote is $1.
Okay.
1 vote is $1. 100 votes is $100. Okay, so I need as many votes as I can get.
Then I've given you a lot of votes.
You have given me a lot of votes, Maria. This is why I love you and why you're on the show, because you're my sponsor and you're so knowledgeable about flood insurance. And this was a great night to talk about all of that and learn a lot about what we really all kind of put out of our minds. Like you said, we've become lackadaisical. We've become inured to it. We haven't had a problem here in a while, but you just look around the country and there's a lot of rain.
Well, the other thing is, Julia, it's not even that complacency. Think about it, in 10, 11 years, how many people have moved into the state of Florida who have
Right.
never
Never
experienced this? And so it's up to us to make sure that everyone is educated and ready to take care of themselves. You can't count on everything else happening to you. You've got to take care of things yourself. So, and I
Absolutely.
think that's why Robin's here to tell us what
Yeah.
to do. I love what they're doing with the kids.
I love the
You know, we're saying-
pillowcase.
I
Yeah,
love the
that's a
pillowcase.
great
Yeah.
project.
I want to color a pillowcase.
Yeah,
It sounds
You know,
great.
that actually grew out of Hurricane Katrina. The head of the Red Cross in New Orleans noticed that most of the kids who came to the shelters had all their belongings in a pillowcase. So that's how that project came to be about 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
and it's the first I've heard about, and yet we should be hearing more about it, because I think
Yeah.
those are great
Yeah.
things within the community. And, you know, I'm excited that, you know, we hear what other people are doing out there, because we've got to all pull together. You know, you can't just wait. You've got to really take action. And so I thank you for that.
Yeah, and it gets the creative juices flowing, you know. And kids are our future, and it's so wonderful when they take ownership of an issue, and it's incredible how young they are these days, and they can do so much. And so my hat's off to our kids in this audience out there. And just to reiterate, where you send your donations is mchealthystart.org. And you find the Dancing with the Martin Stars tab, and you click on that, and then my picture's right there in the top left, and you click donate. So any amount is welcome and appreciated. I'm second, like I said, I wanna be first, because I just wanna be first,
You
right?
have to be
I have
first.
to be first, and the reason, if I'm first, that will really, really enhance my dance score, which I'm gonna do my best to bust a move on the Latin hustle. But just hedging my bets that if we could just make sure we get those donations, we got 10 days, I know I can do it. I really appreciate everyone's help out there so far, my aunts, my cousins, my sisters, my mom, I hope you're watching, Mama. She's wonderful, she just turned 90, and she's in Texas, and she's not gonna be able to make it here, but my sister Catherine and my niece Mary and her husband, I'm so excited to have family to be in the audience, and a lot of good friends. And this is really happening, I can't believe it, I've been
Yeah.
working all summer, and now it's.
Next week's gonna be your
Well,
last show before the event.
Before the event, right,
Yes.
before the event.
You do a lot for
Yes.
the community too, so
Well,
thank
you
you
know,
very much.
You're welcome, you're welcome. You both come with stellar credentials. I wrote back to Robin today, I'm like, okay, I need to put this in 14 point because there's so much that I couldn't even read it all, and I had to stretch it out. And just so much of your background is involved with the community and all of this, you know, nonprofit world, so thank you for that. And Maria, your credits are extensive, you know, being Businesswoman of the Year, and the Seroptimus, you know, had named you, you were Realtor of the Year, Martin County, and that's where my claim to fame that happened with the show. So I think we're done for the night. Okay, thanks,
Thank
Franny.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
Bye.
tuning in. See you next week with Hibiscus House will be here. Okay, so we're still on live there. So thanks, everybody. I'm gonna be coming around to turn off the camera. I'm limping over.
Yeah, limp over.
Oh my gosh.
That like flew by.
Does it fly
Now
by?
I've
I
gotta
told you.
go pack.
Yeah, oh gosh, you're leaving for South Carolina, that's right.
You know,
Bye, everybody. This will be on YouTube later.
I have a funny toast story I'll tell you, Julia.
Okay, hang on, let me figure this out. Oh boy.
Northern Treasure Coast and overnight tonight, dry with a low of 76.